Bitcoin's the only asset that exceeds the cost of capital. Bonds don't hold value. They're awful capital assets. Silver doesn't work. Gold doesn't keep up with the cost of capital. Any company that simply had a large portion of their assets in Bitcoin is getting 435%. Bitcoin's the best digital commodity. It's the only crypto in the world recognized as an asset without an issuer by all major regulators. If something's going to be a commodity, there can't be a beneficiary. Satoshi gave up control of the protocol. Satoshi gave up the Satoshi coins. Satoshi stopped trying to influence the network. It was a gift to the world. That's what makes it an asset without an issuer. Bitcoin's the only commodity in the world, A, that's digital. And because it's digital, it's fixed in supply. Everything else is physical, therefore not fixed in supply. That makes Bitcoin superior to gold. Why is Bitcoin the best? It's global, it's digital, it's programmable, it's inelastic, it's durable, it's divisible, it's portable. These are all the things that every other commodity is not. Look at the last 4 years. In an inflationary environment, gold is up 13%, Bitcoin is up 394%. Any good investor will tell you all physical commodities make poor investments. Gold's just the least worst. Bitcoin's the only scarcity. Bitcoin's the first absolutely scarce commodity in human history. So you have to say it represents an entirely new asset class. No amount of money will buy you more time or more Bitcoin. The one thing that's scarce is time. We have bottled time in a Bitcoin. The process of proof of work mining is, in essence, digitally transforming time into an asset. If I give you $100 trillion quadrillion, you won't get more than 21 million Bitcoin. We have created the perfect monetary asset because we have figured out how to duplicate the benefits and the characteristics of time. And ultimately, when you measure your life and everything in your life, you have to measure it against time, because time's the one thing you're not getting back, no matter how rich you are. If you're a rich family and you didn't make money on technology, then you made money on property. Probably you bought very desirable commercial real estate in the middle of the city. People will say things, well, I guess commodities can be manufactured, but land, they're not making that anymore. And look at the picture here. The truth is they are making more land. This is Boston over the course of 300 years. Half of Boston was made. The truth is, given enough money, you can make land, and if you want it, at the end of the day, storing all of your economic energy in land is not truly going to be effective, because it's going to inflate and it's going to be impaired by a whole set of other challenges. So Bitcoin's the best property. This is the greatest city and digital city in the world. There's 220 million inhabitants there right now. Why is this so powerful? It's global. Anybody can go there. It's digital. You can zap there on a mobile phone, and there's billions of mobile devices. It's open. This is a city that's got no mayor to tell you what you can't do. And on the other hand, everybody can zap there with their capital when they want. It's permissionless. And you don't have to buy a building. You can buy a fraction of a piece of property in this city. It's totally divisible, and this is the immortal city. It's a virtual city. Bitcoin's the best property. One of the problems with property is it's inherently corrupting in the physical world, because you have to become the political actor, or another political actor will just take it away from you. And at the point that you're no longer politically capable of defending your property, then the county, the city, the state, the whatever, they just crank your property taxes, expropriate your property, turn it into an airport or a school or whatever, utility line. And that's the best thing about this property. If Bitcoin was a city in cyberspace, it would be 276 blocks wide, 276 blocks high, 276 blocks deep. When you buy Bitcoin, you're buying one of those blocks. That's all there is. Bitcoin is much better than digital property. Bitcoin's the best capital asset. What is capital? Pure economic energy. Bitcoin's digital capital. It is the first occurrence of pure economic energy in the history of humanity. So there's no asset that represented pure economic energy. The closest thing we have to it is the myth of gold. But gold was never pure economic energy. because their gold had to be shipped on wooden ships. It wasn't quite energy at all. It's a commodity. It's inflationary. The Spanish had hyperinflation in the 16th century after they brought all the gold back from the New World. 500% inflation. They collapsed their entire civilization. They destroyed their empire because they found too much gold. Must not have been pure economic energy. And the primary capital assets are equity, credit, bonds that is, currency, and property. They're all impaired by physical constraints. The physical constraints lead to political constraints. Bitcoin's better than that. Bitcoin's immortal, immutable, indestructible. The whole idea of Bitcoin is I create an asset which doesn't live in the physical world, that lives in the virtual world. All these other capital assets, they suffer from those risks. And because Bitcoin doesn't, it's inevitable. Why? Just about everybody, they all agree that generally being wealthier or having economic power is better than not having economic power. Every self-interested human being that's going to compete in a Darwinian world is going to agree that they want immutable, immortal, indestructible capital. What's the best capital asset? Bitcoin. Actually, the S&P is the modern surrogate for cost of capital. Bonds don't hold value. They're awful capital assets. Silver doesn't work. Gold doesn't keep up with the cost of capital. The NASDAQ, interesting, it underperforms the S&P. Why? Sometimes you get some big winners with technology and sometimes you don't, but maybe the S&P is a more broad index and just got a little bit less of a sharp edge to it, less risk in it. And then obviously what we see is Bitcoin's the only asset that exceeds the cost of capital. You invest in anything other than Bitcoin, you're destroying capital, you're destroying wealth. Bitcoin, the best treasury asset. Well, most operating companies surrender their capital to avoid shareholder dilution because if they hold the capital and they invest it in T-bills, they're going to get 3% after tax against a 12% cost of capital per year. And so you hold $100 billion of capital, you destroy $9 billion of shareholder value a year. Cash and credit are both dilutive. Bitcoin is the first treasury asset that's accretive. That is, you carry $100 billion of Bitcoin, it goes up 40% a year, you're earning $40 billion of accretion a year instead of $9 billion of dilution a year. That means Bitcoin changes the rules of modern corporate finance. So modern finance says you're a good CFO if you strip the volatility off the P&L, and then you're a good CFO if you return all the capital to shareholders via buyback or a dividend, no matter how tax inefficient it might be, if you're going to beat the 12% cost of capital and make your stock a store of value. And if you're organically only growing 1, 2, 3% a year, which is, people do the math, if the economy grows 2 or 3% a year and you need your equity to grow or your cash flows to grow 12% a year per share, the only way to do it is to borrow money and buy back your equity and lever up. But at that point, you go to negative capital. So if you hold positive capital, that's what bonds do to you. And if you hold negative capital, now you're fragile. You have one bad quarter, you go bankrupt. So the problem here is that the treasury asset that's conventional is toxic. We've simply accepted the fact that our company is going to die in 20 years. But the reason they're dying in 20 years is you're injecting poison into their veins. If they just stopped injecting the poison, they'd live hundreds of years. It's a very basic insight. The way to flip it is you stop injecting toxic assets onto your balance sheet and you actually put accretive or healthy assets onto a corporate balance sheet. Any company that simply had a large portion of their assets in Bitcoin is getting 435%. MicroStrategy levered up by borrowing cheap debt and buying Bitcoin, and therefore we do better. Now, so what's the best tech investment? Bitcoin's the best tech investment. The best tech investment, an investment in something everybody needs, no one can stop, few understand. If people agree with you when you say, I like Bitcoin, that means it's not a good investment anymore. At the point when it's not controversial and everybody agrees with you, everybody will own it, the price will be 100x. You won't be able to afford to buy 1% of what you want. You want to know it. You don't want them to understand it. Let them take 10 years to figure it out because that's how you 100x.